Chapter 11. Boom. The ground was smashed into a massive crater. In the thick smoke and dust, Gensou emerged somewhat disheveled, quickly retreating backward. Following closely behind him, a long, massive wood dragon also charged out. Compared to its initial state, the wood dragon had many damages, but it quickly regenerated, gathering and replenishing itself with the surrounding trees, restoring to its original form. Earth release. Earth flow continuous wall. Realizing this was not a sustainable approach, Gensou first summoned one giant earth wall after another to block the wood dragon's advance, then created two earth clones to fend off the surrounding tree attacks. After completing these maneuvers, Gensou, as the main body, swiftly formed hand seals, and the chakra within him became more active than ever before. Lava release. Ash giant. Consuming a large amount of chakra, a gray ash giant, much larger than the wood dragon, rapidly formed in front of Gensou. This was just the beginning. Gensou formed new seals again. Lava release. Molten armor. Layer upon layer of hot lava covered the ash giant, providing it with a thick and sturdy armor. Corrosion release. Acidic hands. The ash giant grew a pair of large corrosive hands. Scorch release. Steaming hands. Another pair of deep red, high-temperature hands extended from the giant's body. Finally. Boil release. Unmatched strength. Ultimate combination jutsu. Flame god descends. Woo. Huge steam currents ran through its entire body. Like a high-speed engine, the originally massive body of the ash giant suddenly grew even larger, releasing more power, eventually forming a colossal being even bigger than the tailed beasts, clad in molten armor and possessing 3 pairs of arms. Gensou called this combination jutsu, which combined lava release, corrosion release, scorch release, and boil release, representing his deep research into fire, earth, wind, and water chakra natures, the flame god. As soon as the jutsu was completed. Coincidentally, the wood dragon, carrying strong winds, broke through the earth flow continuous wall and charged towards the flame god with overwhelming force. Crush it. With a body flicker, standing atop the flame god's head, Gensou crossed his arms and calmly gave the order. As soon as he finished speaking, with a thunderous noise, the flame god took a step forward, and the 3 pairs of giant hands, each with different properties, fiercely grabbed at the wood dragon like an eagle catching a chick. In contrast, the now seemingly much smaller wood dragon didn't back down, charging head-on. After a loud bang, the flame god remained unmoved, while the wood dragon let out a cry of pain. The wood dragon, gripped tightly by the 6 giant hands, struggled desperately but couldn't break free. Outside the battlefield. Seeing everything, Reto, Ishikawa, and the future second Kages were all dumbfounded. They never expected Gensou's true power to be so ferocious that even the famed wood release could be suppressed. Hashirama, who had left the wood dragon's head, also didn't anticipate Gensou having such a trump card. With a stern expression, he faced the flame god, clapped his hands together, and shouted. Wood release, all-encompassing hand technique. Around the flame god, numerous giant wooden hands instantly emerged from the ground, reaching out to grab the flame god. Standing atop the flame god's head, Gensou stomped his foot, causing the flame god to move, using the wood dragon's long body as a whip, continuously lashing out at the giant wooden hands attacking from all directions. But the sheer number of wooden hands, along with their ability to appear mysteriously, soon led to the flame god's foot being firmly grasped by one of the wooden hands. Seeing more wooden hands approaching, the flame god threw aside the wood dragon, causing steam to boil throughout its body once more. A pair of large wings formed from high-temperature steam appeared on its back. Roar. With a gust of wind, the flame god broke free from the wooden hands, its massive body soaring into the air, though not very high due to its size. Seeing this, Hashirama ceased the all-encompassing hand technique, deeply looking at Gensou, who was now overlooking him from the sky, and clapped his hands together forcefully, shouting. Wood release. Wood human technique. With a large infusion of chakra, a nearby tree rapidly grew, transforming into a gigantic wood human within a few moments. After a dragon's roar, the tattered wood dragon flew over, wrapping around the wood human's neck and, with an infusion of chakra, quickly restored itself. The wood human, comparable to a fully powered Susanoo, made its entrance. Hashirama stood atop the wood human, his black eyes full of battle spirit, looking at Gensou above, shouting, "Gensou! Hashirama!" Following Hashirama's intent, Gensou stepped on the flame god, and with a flap of its wings, the flame god rapidly charged downwards towards the equally massive wood human. The war drums thundered, and the heavens changed color. Under the increasingly awestruck eyes of the onlookers outside the battlefield, the scene resembled a mythical battle between gods and demons. The wood human and the flame god, two entities comparable to, if not surpassing, the tailed beasts, were engaged in a fierce struggle. In comparison, the observers seemed insignificant as ants. Boom! The tangible shockwaves from the clash between the wood human and the flame god swept outwards from the center of the battle. Trees were uprooted. A river was blown out of its bed. A nearby hill collapsed. And this was just the beginning. Amidst the earth's unceasing cries of agony, the flame god and the wood human relentlessly clashed. The massive corrosive hands of the flame god intertwined tightly with the wood human's hands. As the wood dragon wrapped around the wood human's neck let out a long roar, it fiercely bit towards the flame god, only to be pinned down by another pair of molten hands. As for the last pair of scorching hands of the flame god, they gripped the wood human's body, evaporating its moisture and chakra with sizzling steam. In response, the wood human's body continuously glowed with the color of life, visibly healing its wounds at a rapid pace. The battle between the flame god and the wood human showed no sign of a quick resolution. Meanwhile, the real protagonists, Gensou and Hashirama, weren't idle either. On top of their respective giants, the two peak ninjas exchanged a glance and didn't waste any words. Boom! A piercing sonic boom erupted. A fist coated in iron clashed with a wooden palm in midair, producing a deafening sound. Not even a second later, another clash occurred. Then the second, the third, the fourth. Countless intense collisions continued in a short period. Although they didn't seem as visually striking as the giants below them, their momentum was no less formidable. This is what a true god-level battle of the ninja world looks like. For a long time. Outside the battlefield, the silent crowd included Tobirama, who bitterly expressed the thoughts of everyone present. End of chapter. 7 comments 0 vote. Chapter 12. Clang, clang, clang. The continuous sound of metal clashing echoed as Gensou and Hashirama transformed into two black streaks, colliding and intertwining at speeds difficult for the naked eye to follow atop the heads of the wood giant and the flame god. Deflecting Hashirama's incoming punch with one hand, Gensou moved in close, the fingers of his other hand transforming into a blade, slashing towards Hashirama's neck with a sound that seemed to tear through the air. Hashirama leaned his upper body backward, narrowly dodging the hand blade, and then swept his right leg upwards like a whip. Gensou raised his arm to block, but Hashirama's monstrous strength burst forth like a flood. Crack, crack. The steel release, known for its defense, finally gave out after enduring multiple blows from Hashirama's immense strength, emitting a shattering sound. Blood splattered. Ignoring his injuries, Gensou used Hashirama's force to propel himself, appearing beside him in an instant. Boom. Caught off guard, Hashirama was kicked away. Gensou followed up quickly, gripping Hashirama's arms with both hands, and using the dark release to rapidly absorb his chakra. Hashirama trembled slightly, but quickly recovered, ramming into Gensou with force. Not being greedy, Gensou twisted his waist, leveraging his strength to throw Hashirama away. Sizzle. The chakra absorbed from Hashirama started to work within Gensou's body. In the blink of an eye, the wounds that had just bled were fully healed. As expected of Hashirama, and this is just his regular chakra. If it were Sage Chakra, the effect would be even more pronounced. Gensou glanced at Hashirama, who had stabilized himself not far away and seemed unscathed, and sighed inwardly. Of course, if it were Sage Chakra, he wouldn't dare to absorb it. While Dark Release was impressive, it couldn't compare to the Rinnegan. The Rinnegan could absorb Sage Chakra without issue, but the Dark Release would cause one's body to be destroyed by the rampant natural energy if absorbed. Additionally, despite absorbing a large amount of chakra from Hashirama, which would leave anyone else severely weakened, Hashirama remained as vigorous as ever. For Hashirama, what was a large amount of chakra to others was just a drop in the bucket. His lost chakra was replenished quickly. The sage body is truly cheating. Seeing Hashirama charging at him with undiminished vigor, Gensou sighed, his eyes sharpening as he rushed to meet him. The grand battle continued. The Flame God and the Wood Giant, resembling deities and demons in a mythical era, clashed fiercely with simple punches and kicks, yet each strike was intensely dangerous and destructive, turning the surrounding landscape upside down. The battle between Gensou and Hashirama didn't stop either. As time passed, their battlefield extended from the heads of the two giants to the pockmarked plains below. Wood Release, advent of a world of flowering trees. Hashirama unleashed his signature jutsu once more. Though Gensou was now panting heavily, he responded swiftly and skillfully. Seeing that the advent of a world of flowering trees couldn't subdue Gensou, Hashirama crossed his fingers and shouted again. Wood Release, advent of a world of flowering trees. Vines rapidly grew out. Among them, giant flowers, larger than houses, rose up, their petals closed. Seeing the giant flowers about to bloom, Gensou's expression changed dramatically. Once the flowers bloomed, their pollen would be released, causing anyone who inhaled it to faint. Both Madara during the Warring States period and the Five Kage in the future knew this well. I can't let these flowers bloom. Gensou's expression hardened, and he pressed his hands together in front of him. Dust Release, detachment of the primitive world technique. A semi-transparent cube appeared in Gensou's hands. With a push, the fist-sized cube rapidly expanded, enveloping the entire world of flowering trees. There was no explosion, no tremor. As if an eraser had wiped a blackboard clean, a blinding white light flashed, and the vast world of flowering trees vanished without a trace, leaving only a cracked, dry land. Time seemed to freeze. Outside the battlefield, this time it was Tobarama's turn to look deeply at the future second Tsuchikage, Mew. Not only him, but everyone present, including the first Tsuchikage, Ishikawa, turned to Mew after witnessing the devastating white light from Gensou's hand. Dust Release. Before this, Mew was the only one in the entire ninja world who could use it. Mew, who had also been shocked into silence, saw himself become the center of attention and could only smile wryly and shake his head. It's not surprising for someone who can develop so many Kekkei Genkai to also develop Dust Release. His Dust Release is far superior to mine. Though Mew had developed Dust Release, its power was far less than what Gensou had just demonstrated. Despite the shock, his heart was full of admiration and longing. Mew's explanation was accepted by everyone. There was no way he could have personally taught Gensou. But this deepened everyone's impression of Gensou's talent. Ranking by the word, bloodline selection was above bloodline elimination, which was above Kekkei Genkai. Gensou had not achieved bloodline selection, but after developing so many Kekkei Genkai, he had mastered bloodline elimination. After all, if Mew and Onoki could master bloodline elimination, how could Gensou, with his superior talent, not? This was the most powerful jutsu he had mastered so far. Combining everything, Gensou's power was fully demonstrated. Even with other miscellaneous abilities and secret techniques, they would not have much effect against the formidable Hashirama. Dust Release, detachment of the primitive world technique. Another conical semi-transparent barrier shot out from Gensou's hand, aimed directly at Hashirama not far away. Knowing its immense power, Hashirama didn't try to block it. He leapt away swiftly. Though he dodged, the massive wood giant behind him couldn't. Under Gensou's precise aim, the Dust Release engulfed the wood giant's head in white light. Without any resistance, the wood giant's head disintegrated into atomic particles. Strike while the iron is hot. The flame god roared, steam billowing from its body, and its 6 arms exerted force. In the end, the headless wood giant collapsed and couldn't rise again. End of chapter. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 13. Wood splinters flew as the glory of the wood release collapsed. Gensou did not relax at all. At this moment, Hashirama, whose feet had just touched the ground again, glanced at the fallen wooden giant before finally focusing on Gensou. "There's no other way," he said calmly, bringing his hands together in a prayer gesture. It was like the calm before the storm. Gensou looked on with a grave expression. The next second. Sage art. With a loud shout, an aura far stronger than before erupted from Hashirama. Dark red markings instantly spread across his eyes, with a target-like mark appearing on his forehead, and the pupils of his eyes turning from black to yellow. This was Sage mode. But it didn't end there. With the markings of a sage on his face, Hashirama raised his head, the vast ocean of sage chakra within him surging fiercely. Pressing his hands together even more forcefully, he shouted once again. Sage art. Wood release. True several thousand hands. Boom, boom, boom. The rumbling that followed was several dozen times more intense than all the previous battles combined. Like an earthquake, as Gensou steadied himself, he saw, under the astonished gaze of everyone outside the battlefield, a gigantic Buddha statue with thousands of arms rising from the ground. The size of the wooden giant and the flame god was already enough to awe people. But now, the flame god, which had seemed like a god or demon, appeared like a mere toy in front of the true several thousand hands Buddha. Even though he had seen this in the anime, witnessing it firsthand, seeing this Buddha statue that seemed to connect heaven and earth, Gensou couldn't help but show an expression of sheer astonishment. Is this really achievable by a human? He was not alone. Ishikawa, Reto, and others, who had seen this scene many times during the Warring States period, were filled with deep memories and lingering fear. This is what it means to be the god of shinobi who pacified the Warring States. This scene exemplified that title. Soon, Hashirama's shout broke the silence of the battlefield. Standing atop the true several thousand hands Buddha, he shouted at Gensou. I'm coming, Gensou. I hope you never come. Gensou's mouth twitched. After fighting Hashirama for so long, he had started to gain some confidence. But now, with Hashirama fully unleashing his power, Gensou felt his newly kindled hope snuffing out. As expected. Sage art. Wood release. True several thousand hands. Top transformed Buddha. With an earth-shaking roar, Hashirama, standing on the Buddha statue like the sage of 6 paths, launched his most powerful attack. The flame god struggled in defiance. But just like the full-bodied 9 tails under the Buddha statue's assault, several massive wooden hands from the true several thousand hands easily swatted the flame god aside, ultimately grasping it in one hand. So unfair. Unable to withstand the top transformed Buddha's assault, Gensou dodged narrowly and exclaimed in frustration. The flame god, which could contend with the wooden giant and complete Susanoo, couldn't withstand a few rounds under the true several thousand hands, top transformed Buddha. The same applied to the 9 tails. Even the full-bodied 9 tails, superior to the other 8-tailed beasts, was easily subdued by the true several thousand hands. Gensou found it hard to imagine what it would look like if the true several thousand hands faced the 10 tails. Though Hashirama wasn't at the 6 paths level, under the true several thousand hands, top transformed Buddha, Gensou felt that Hashirama was even more formidable. The flame god soon met its demise. From that moment on, Gensou felt like Sun Wukong facing the Buddha's palm, with nowhere to escape as more and more wooden arms targeted him. I read it, so good piece of work. Highly recommended if you have time. Dust release. Detachment of the primitive world technique. With no way to dodge, Gensou used dust release again. But this time, the effect was limited. He only managed to destroy a dozen wooden arms. Before he could even catch his breath, more wooden arms extended from the thousand-armed Buddha, giving Gensou no respite as they aimed to crush him with every strike. Farewell, Gensou. Seeing Gensou below, whose aura was waning and who was covered in wounds, Hashirama bid his final respectful and regretful goodbye. He pointed his hand, and another batch of wooden arms extended from the thousand-armed Buddha, intending to end Gensou's life. Farewell. Severely injured and with only a tenth of his strength left, Gensou looked up at the massive wooden hands covering his entire view and smiled faintly, whispering in a tone Hashirama couldn't hear. Not farewell, but see you later, Hashirama. From the moment the Five Kage had unfairly ambushed him, Gensou had foreseen his fate. When Hashirama used the sage art, would release, true several thousand hands, top transformed Buddha, the last bit of hope in Gensou's heart vanished. It's time to plan for the future. Gensou looked around at his blood scattered from severe injuries, took one last look at this world, and just before the final blow of the true several thousand hands, he made a special hand seal. Forbidden technique, breath of eternal sleep. Mysterious black symbols appeared all over his body, connecting into a continuous stream, forming a black membrane that covered him. Time seemed to freeze. The wounds on Gensou's body stopped bleeding, his boiling chakra calmed, and his racing heart quieted down. His body's vitality was fixed in place. But as a price, Gensou's soul began to dissipate rapidly. Look forward to our future meeting. Leaving this final statement, Gensou's aura completely vanished. His body, wrapped in the black membrane, sank into the ground, blending perfectly with the surroundings, leaving no trace. Boom. The final blow from the true several thousand hands struck. A massive crater formed. It's over. In sage mode, sensing that Gensou's aura had truly disappeared, Hashirama let out a deep breath and dispersed the true several thousand hands. Even with the sage body, he couldn't hide his exhaustion, breathing heavily. This battle had been as taxing as his fight with Madara years ago. Big brother. A figure arrived at high speed. It was Tobirama. He looked around and asked, "Is Gensou dead?" Hashirama straightened up and nodded. Feigning death wouldn't escape his sage mode perception. Tobirama wasn't surprised and asked again. "Where is Gensou's body?" Hashirama shook his head. "Gensou was too strong. I couldn't hold back." "I see." Tobirama felt a bit regretful. Fortunately, there were plenty of Gensou's blood cells on the battlefield, which could still be studied. Hashirama, seemingly aware of his brother's thoughts, solemnly instructed, "Gather Gensou's remains and return them to the Hagoromo clan. He deserves that respect." "Big brother, you." Tobirama started to protest, but his ear twitched. He took a step forward, subtly positioning himself protectively in front of the exhausted Hashirama. At that moment, several figures arrived. It was Reto, and the others from the 4 great ninja villages. Gensou is finally dead. Seeing the scene, the 3 Kage, Reto, and Ishikawa, expressed their complex feelings. A formidable enemy had fallen. But another still loomed over them like a shadow. Fortunately, this one had no grand ambitions. Everything seemed to be moving in a positive direction. Then, let's celebrate the arrival of the era of peace. First Kage Reto, First Hokage, First Tsuchikage Ishikawa, and the newly inaugurated Second Mizukage Hazuka Genjutsu all extended their hands. Peace, huh? Hashirama sighed and extended his hand as well. Finally, the leaders of the 5 great ninja villages clasped hands, symbolizing the dawn of a new era of peace. This was the wish of all who had survived the Warring States period. It seemed. It had truly come true. One day later. The battlefield, now a valley instead of a plain, had just settled down when an old visitor arrived. Is there really no trace left? Tobirama stroked his chin, surveying the surroundings. After an hour, he emerged from underground, frowning and shaking his head. Still no findings. Gensou's body was indeed thoroughly destroyed. Fortunately, his trip wasn't in vain, as he collected some of Gensou's remaining cells. With his brother not around, he could finally study the man who rivaled gods thoroughly. In good spirits, Tobirama left. Tobirama's arrival was just the beginning. The body of a ninja, even a single cell, contained valuable information about their life. Not only Tobirama but others across the ninja world were interested in Gensou's body, leading to a continuous stream of visitors to the valley. Years later, a proud and powerful man arrived, but unlike the others, he didn't dig for anything. He simply glanced around before snorting and leaving. Decades later, a pale man with a serpentine appearance extended a blood-red tongue, his golden pupils filled with excitement as he surveyed the area. The one who rivaled gods. Don't disappoint me. And so, a new chapter began. End of chapter. 7 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. Zaelum. Download app now. Chapter 14. Konoha Year 60. The smoke of the Third Great Ninja War had long dissipated, and in this era of peace, children played ninja games excitedly, dreaming of becoming the next Hokage when they grew up. The Hidden Leaf Village. Compared to its early days 60 years ago, it had changed dramatically. The increasingly bustling streets and buildings were just the beginning. On the Hokage Rock, 3 new faces had joined the lone visage of Hashirama. Below the rock, the former residences of the Senju and Uchiha clans were gone. The 2 founding clans of Konoha had dwindled to a few members, such as Tsunade and Sasuke. The villagers didn't care about past glories and histories. To them, the Third Hokage was the strongest Hokage Konoha had ever had. The once established facts had become unrecognizable after being eroded by time and obscured by layers of cover-ups. Only those who had lived through that era would laugh and shake their heads upon hearing today's wild claims. But what did it matter? They were just remnants of a bygone era. The times moved forward, and past glories, no matter how magnificent, had been swept into the dustbin of history, no longer influencing the present. The current era belonged to the new generation. What was the god of shinobi? Who were the ones who stood shoulder to shoulder with gods? They hadn't seen them. They had witnessed the Third Hokage, the ninjutsu professor, led Konoha to victory in the unprecedentedly intense First, Second, and Third Great Ninja Wars. They had seen the legendary 3 Sannin, who had contracts with the 3 great sacred places. They had witnessed the speed of the Yellow Flash, who could contend with the A and B duo. What? Someone stronger than them? Hey! Let them come out and show us. Can't bring them out? Then stop talking nonsense. At this point, anyone wanting to argue could only close their mouths in frustration. Until one day, a gifted rogue ninja from Konoha completed a forbidden technique left behind by the second Hokage, called the reanimation jutsu. Finally, the glory of those recorded only in texts reappeared in the present, blinding everyone's eyes. Times were changing, everything had transformed. The winner, Uzumaki Naruto. Yay, woohoo, yeah. As the proctor, Genma, announced the final result, a blonde boy named Naruto ignored his exhaustion and, amidst the cheers and applause of thousands of spectators, celebrated wildly on the battlefield, blowing kisses to the crowd. This was the Chunin Exams site in Konoha. Genin from Konoha, the Sand Village, the Sound Village, the Rain Village, the Grass Village, and other ninja villages had gathered for the Chunin selection exams. After 2 rounds of examinations that eliminated a large number of participants, they had arrived at the final round. This was a grand competition watched by thousands of spectators, including many prominent figures, nobles, and even the Third Hokage and the Fourth Kage. Right from the start, no one expected a boy named Uzumaki Naruto to defeat the favored winner, Hyuga Neji, from the prestigious Hyuga clan. The crowd erupted in excitement. Subsequent matches were equally thrilling. Shikamaru outwitted Temari but ultimately conceded. Sasuke made a dramatic entrance, engaging in a fierce battle with the one-tailed Jinchuriki, Gaara. But none of this was as shocking as the moment when feathers from the Nirvana Temple technique began to fall, and the fourth Kage placed a kunai at the neck of the third Hokage, Hiruzen, declaring the start of the plan to destroy Konoha. Boom. Boom. Explosions, battles, screams, and wails. One moment, Konoha was peaceful, the next, it was engulfed in war. On the roof of the Chunin Exam observation platform. Within the four violet flames formation. Orochimaru revealed his true face, and after a brief exchange with his beloved teacher, he became serious. Sarutobi-sensei, don't disappoint me too much. Orochimaru sneered at the aged Hiruzen. Removing his Hokage robe to reveal his black combat attire, Hiruzen, with a serious expression, threw shuriken and formed hand signs. Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. Instantly, countless shuriken multiplied, covering the sky as they shot toward Orochimaru. Orochimaru clapped his hands and smirked. Summoning Jutsu. Reanimation Jutsu. With a rumble, several upright coffins rose from the ground, blocking all the shuriken Shadow Clone's attacks. Reanimation Jutsu. That is. Seeing this, Sarutobi Hiruzen's pupils contracted sharply. As the Hokage, he was well aware of the reanimation jutsu recorded in the Book of Seals. Summoning the dead. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at the two coffins that had risen first, marked with the characters, first, and, God. Then he saw two more coffins marked with, second, and, fourth, slowly rising. Having a vague sense of the implications and feeling deeply uneasy, his expression changed, and he quickly made hand signs to stop Orochimaru's summoning. Sensing that the summoning of the fourth coffin had been halted, Orochimaru shrugged nonchalantly. The fourth one doesn't seem to work. Oh well. Ultimately, 3 coffins were summoned. Sarutobi Hiruzen, as if facing a formidable enemy, watched everything unfold. Soon. With a creaking sound, the lids of the 3 coffins, filled with shuriken, slowly fell to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. Clatter, clatter. The sound of metal clinking came from within the dust cloud. Hiruzen clenched his fists. Outside the 4 violet flames formation, a team of Anbu watched intently. Finally, the dust settled. Everyone present saw 3 men in old-fashioned war armor, their bodies covered in cracks, step out of the coffin stiffly. That's the first and second Hokage. The Anbu watching from outside quickly recognized the first and second Hokage of Konoha. After all, their faces were familiar, having been seen since childhood. But who was that young man in silver armor? The Anbu looked at each other, puzzled by the unfamiliar figure standing alongside the first and second Hokage. The Anbu didn't know, but Hiruzen, as the Hokage, knew very well. The man who fought the first Five Kage, causing the death of the first Mizukage and the crippling of the first Raikage, the one who took a great effort for the first Hokage to finally kill, a man said to stand shoulder to shoulder with gods. Hagoromo Gensou. Hiruzen, looking at the reanimated Gensou, felt his heart sink as he spoke each word. Oh. I didn't expect people still remember me. Gensou, lifting his head to enjoy the long-lost sunlight, looked at Hiruzen and smiled brightly. Not bad, you deserve praise. End of chapter. 9 comments 0 vote. Chapter 15. The poll is up. Go to my Patreon to vote for your favorite fanfic and get it picked up. It's free. What is it like after death? As someone who had experienced it, Gensou honestly didn't know how to describe it. Perhaps, it was like the world seen by a blind person. Not darkness, but void. To put it specifically, it was similar to the void one sees when closing one eye while the other remains open. Time had no reference after death and seemed to pass by quickly. One moment, Hagoromo closed his eyes, and the next, he felt like he had opened them again. It was only when he saw the familiar sight of Konoha village and the aged face of the third Hokage, Hiruzen, that he realized he had truly come to the present, over 50 years later. Time flies so fast. Unsurprisingly, he had been resurrected by Orochimaru using the reanimation jutsu. Hagoromo looked at his cracked hands with some emotion, feeling the body that didn't actually belong to him. The quality of the sacrifice body I'm in is too poor. After examining himself, he shook his head inwardly. The reason why Madara was so overwhelmingly powerful when reanimated during the Fourth Great Ninja War was that Kabuto had prepared a high-quality sacrifice, allowing him to exert his full strength. The quality of the sacrifice Hagoromo was in was far inferior even to ordinary white Zetsu, indicating the level of power he could exhibit. No need to say, the same likely applied to Hashirama and Tobirama beside him. No wonder the declining Third Hokage could fight two of them and leave behind a somewhat impressive record before his death. At this moment, Hashirama and Tobirama also realized what was happening. Hashirama looked at Hiruzen in front of him, his eyes full of memories. Long time no see, monkey. You've aged, Sarutobi, Tobirama added calmly. As the Hokage he had personally chosen before his death, Hiruzen had been quite young at that time. Seeing him now, Hiruzen had grown old. Has it been 30 or 40 years? While assessing, Tobirama glanced at Hagoromo, who seemed slightly out of place, and instinctively frowned. Why is this guy here too? Facing the two former leaders of Konoha, whom he respected deeply, Hiruzen felt both nostalgic and guilty. He said, I never expected to see the two of you in such circumstances. I'm sorry for disturbing your eternal rest. Reanimation jutsu, huh? Tobirama had already figured out the situation and turned to look at Orochimaru behind him, saying coldly, is this young man the one who used the forbidden technique to summon us? Impressive, to have completed my jutsu to this extent. It's a pity he's gone astray. Didn't I tell you long ago not to develop those dangerous forbidden techniques? It seems you didn't listen. Hashirama sighed beside him, then turned his head and noticed Hagoromo watching everything silently. His eyes lit up, and he greeted, long time no see, Hagoromo. Hashirama. Hagoromo turned his gaze to Hashirama. Compared to himself, this guy had lived a few more years. Hagoromo smiled and asked, for you, it's been a long time. For me, it's just been a blink of an eye. By the way, I said before that Madara was more radical than me. So, what interesting things happened after I died? Hashirama's expression fell as he recalled the Battle of the Valley of the End, and he said in a low tone, Madara. Just as I expected. Seeing Hashirama's expression, Gensou felt relieved knowing the ninja world had developed along its original trajectory. Feeling good, he continued to rub salt into the wound. Not just Madara, but the peace Kage kept preaching about was also the same. Hashirama, if the ninja world had remained peaceful after my death, why would Konoha need to change Hokage so frequently within just a few decades? Hagoromo pointed towards the Hokage rock not far away. If the ninja world had indeed been peaceful, Konoha wouldn't have needed to frequently add new Hokage. Hashirama followed Hagoromo's direction and looked at the four huge heads on the Hokage rock, his expression tightening. Though somewhat naive, he was not stupid. Tobirama, is it true? Hashirama asked his brother, who had also gone to the afterlife. The ninja world had indeed remained peaceful during his lifetime. But after his death, he didn't know. Tobirama glanced at the gloating Gensou beside him and was about to answer. Orochimaru, who had been standing as a backdrop, walked over and said indifferently, old men chatting can stop now. It's time to get down to business. Hearing this, Hagoromo's lips twitched. Old men. Having always been regarded as a young prodigy, he found it hard to adapt to the modern terminology. Seeing Orochimaru approaching him first, Hashirama could only put down his questions and sighed, so, no matter what era it is, we have to fight. To the legendary god of shinobi, Orochimaru replied courteously, you enjoy it, don't you? Hiruzen, seeing this, became furious and yelled, how dare you mock the dead, Orochimaru? Those who toy with time will face dire consequences. Orochimaru sneered, took out control tags, and demonstrated his stance through action. Sometimes, having poor quality sacrifices for the reanimation jutsu wasn't a bad thing. Like now. With limited power to exert, Hashirama couldn't break free from Orochimaru's control like he could with White Zetsu's body during the Fourth Great Ninja War. The same went for Tobirama. As the creator of the reanimation jutsu, he could break free from its constraints like Madara Uchiha, but with the current body's limited strength, he couldn't escape Orochimaru's control. So, all they could do was watch Orochimaru insert the control tags into their brains, dimming their eyes and sealing their souls. Seeing his two old friends lose consciousness shortly after meeting again, Hagoromo shrugged and, without concern, suggested to the approaching Orochimaru. "You're Orochimaru, right? Since you know who I am, you should understand I'm different from these two. No need to control me. I'm quite willing to help destroy Konoha." Though unable to break free from the reanimation jutsu's constraints, Hagoromo had backup plans. He didn't mind negotiating and cooperating with Orochimaru. After all, an aware reanimation was far more powerful than one with suppressed consciousness. Hearing this, Orochimaru extended his long tongue, examining the legendary man before him who stood shoulder to shoulder with gods, the most talented man who had ever existed. Such a famous figure, unlike the others he had summoned from the afterlife who constantly berated him for desecrating them, seemed willing to join his side. How interesting, old man. End of chapter. Next chapter.